Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. My name is Oscar and I will be discussing my postgraduate research project exploring the use of traps to control invasive Chinese mitten crabs. A quick overview of what you can expect from this video. First, an introduction into the Chinese mitten crab, followed by a look into the current trapping methods. I will then discuss the four main research topics of my project: a location suitability assessment, a fixed trap deployment in the River Dee, the deployment and development of condo traps, and lastly, some planned mark release recapture experiments. Let's begin. The Chinese mitten crab is native to East Asia, and it's easily identifiable by its unique furry claws, as well as four spines on each side of the carapace and a central notch. They are invasive in many regions around the world, both the east and west coasts of the United States, and they are widespread across Europe, where after arriving in the ballast water of ships, they have thrived. Chinese mitten crabs spawn in estuaries, and in spring, juveniles undertake long upstream migrations to fresh water, where they mature for 1 to 5 years before adults migrate back downstream to estuaries for spawning. They pose many threats to native ecosystems. They burrow into riverbanks, destabilizing them and leading to potential collapse. They are opportunistic feeders and will eat whatever they can get their claws on, including fish eggs. They will damage and consume aquatic plants, and they are known carriers of crayfish plague. Due to females laying up to 1 million eggs, the Chinese mitten crab population can grow very large. The image on screen shows how an area can become engulfed by migrating crabs. Fyke nets were used to trap Chinese mitten crabs. However, they often catch unwanted bycatch. A study used various modifications aiming to reduce bycatch. However, even with modifications, it was clear. Fyke nets produce too much bycatch and trap too few crabs. Due to the migratory behavior of the Chinese mitten crab and their inability to swim, an opportunity to trap large numbers of migrating crabs is available. Paul van Loon of the Flemish Environment Agency teamed up with Jonas Scheurlink of the University of Antwerp to develop a new trap. The concept is simple. 2 ramps lead up to a rectangular container situated on the riverbed. The crabs cannot climb out of the container, and their only escape is up the collection tube and into the collection box. Fish are unaffected, and can simply swim over the trap. Here is a look at the first deployment in Belgium. The trap worked brilliantly and caught over 1 million crabs across 2 years, and the only bycatch was 2 toads. Let's look at what made this location suitable. Firstly, it was situated on a fish ladder, so the area was controlled. The waterway was around 8 meters wide, with relatively short riverbanks. The flow was not extreme and the area not tidally influenced. It is also easily accessible on foot or via road. Not every location is suited to a trap installation. This example waterway is very wide and with vegetation and obstacles on both banks. On top of this, the sharp bend creates inconsistent flow conditions, all while the site is not the easiest to access. This is why we developed the location suitability survey. The ramp and slot gap trap is effective, however, it is not suitable for all locations. The aim of this survey is to create a method that allows individuals to assess the suitability of a waterway location for the deployment of a trap. So how does it work? The survey is split into 3 sections. Firstly, there is a desk-based study investigating the area, and this is pass-fail. Then, there is an installation feasibility section and an expected performance section. Each of these sections have 10 criteria points, which are scored from 0, which is a fail, to 3. The average score across the whole survey can then be taken and compared to the suitability index, providing the location with a suitability rating from A to F. Looking back to the unsuitable example, this location scored a 1.94, which is a D. Example 2 performed better. Less riverbank vegetation, easier access, and a lower flow velocity all contributed to a higher score. However, even though the width is less than the first example, it is still problematic. So overall, example location 2 scores 2.29, which is a B. Our final example is of a very well-suited location. A manageable width, reasonable flow conditions, and vegetation combined with good site access means an overall score of 2.61 and a suitability rating of A, making it a prime candidate site to deploy a ramp and slot gap Chinese mitten crab trap. To recap, this survey produces an overall score and suitability rating for the trapping of Chinese mitten crab traps using a ramp and slot gap trap. So far, the survey has been developed using locations in the River Dee catchment. More testing of the survey across further catchments is planned to develop and improve the survey even further. Let's look back to the suitable location, because this will be the site of our trap deployment in the River Dee, pending licensing approval. The River Dee catchment encompasses part of northwest England and North Wales. Chester Weir, the location of the trap, is displayed on the map. Here is an aerial shot of Chester Weir, and this waterway situated alongside the weir is one of the possible migration routes for crabs through this section of the Dee, and is where our trap will be deployed. I developed a computer model for our design, starting with a model of the waterway itself. The design is the same concept as shown earlier. 2 ramps lined with mesh lead to an opening on a horizontally placed pipe. An end panel at one end means that the crabs must follow the collection tube to the collection box. The main trap pipe will be partially buried into the sediment, and road spikes will be used to further anchor the trap. Here is the design in the waterway itself, and as you can see, there is plenty of room for fish to swim over the trap. Now let's move on to discuss condo traps. Condo traps are small, movable refuge traps that are best used as sampling devices for small aquatic crustaceans. I produced 6 of these traps, which we deployed at Chester Weir Fish Trap, and we were successful in catching migrating juvenile crabs. Bricks were used to reduce trap movement while the traps were deployed. This deployment got us thinking, can we tailor condo traps specifically for the trapping of juvenile Chinese mitten crabs? We came up with an experiment to test this further. The aims are to investigate the impact of crab size on chosen refuge, the potential preference for refuges closer or further from bed level, the length of time spent in refuge, and the potential influence of other crabs in refuge choice behavior. The experiment used condo traps with tubes of varying sizes arranged in a 3x4 formation. 4 traps were then positioned in a tank with crabs being released, and their choice of refuge was observed. The initial analysis from the first set of experiments showed that smaller crabs preferred the 32mm tube, and larger crabs preferred the 50, 63, or 90mm tubes. No significant relationship between crab size and refuge choice was shown for the 40 or 75mm tubes. Here we can see on the graph that for the 32mm tube, the probability of a crab choosing this refuge decreases as the crab size increases. The opposite effect is shown for the 50, 63, and 90mm tubes. These results are only our initial findings. We intend to complete more experiments to investigate the questions posed in our aims further. Once our fixed trap is deployed, and alongside further condo trap deployments, we intend to conduct mark release recapture experiments. The aims of these experiments are to assess the effectiveness of the fixed trap, assess the effectiveness of condo traps, and investigate the migration routes of crabs through the Chester Weir section of the River Dee. Here is a picture of Chester Weir, and as you can see, to the right-hand side are routes around the weir, which will be the focus of our experiment. This is an aerial view of Chester Weir, and circled is where the fixed trap and condo traps will be deployed. So, to recap, a fixed trap and condo traps will be deployed at Chester Weir and assessed using mark release recapture experiments, assessing both the performance of the traps and the migration routes of crabs past Chester Weir. Let's quickly recap the project so far. We've investigated Chinese mitten crab trapping methods, developed a location suitability survey for deploying traps, selected a location and designed a trap to be deployed in the River Dee, successfully deployed condo traps and begun experimentation to refine them for the trapping of juvenile Chinese mitten crabs. There are still a further 2 years of research scheduled for this project. This will include further testing of the location suitability survey, more experiments refining condo traps, the deployment of a fixed trap in the River Dee, and mark release recapture experiments to assess trap effectiveness and migration routes. Before we finish, I just want to mention the 𝙀𝙀𝙞𝙤𝙀 project. The 𝙀𝙀𝙞𝙤𝙀 project is an EU Interreg North Sea project aiming to test catch and management strategies for the Chinese mitten crab. Our project is not officially part of 𝙀𝙀𝙞𝙤, however, we've been working together and sharing our ideas. If you're interested in learning more about 𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀, scanning the QR code on screen will take you to their website. Here is a reference list for this video. And that brings us to the end. Thank you everyone for watching. It has been a pleasure to have the opportunity to share my research project with you today. I want to thank Aberystwyth University, my supervisors Dr. Joe Ironside and Dr. Daniel Mills for their support, as well as Dr. Paul Clark from the Natural History Museum. Lastly, I want to thank Natural Resources Wales. The first 2 years of this project have been funded through the Welsh Government's Nature Networks programme to strengthen the resilience of Wales's protected land and marine sites. If you have any questions about our research, please email me using the address on screen. Thank you all again for watching, and goodbye.